Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Cherelle and I am the creator and designer behind Cherelle Around Patterns. And this is a place where we can come and create stylish, fun, but functional bags. However, today I'm excited because I get to introduce my newest pattern to you all, and it's just in time for the summer vibe, so let's talk about it. Let me introduce to you the Johnnie B Travel Bag, or the JBT for short. This bag is near and dear to my heart. It's named after my late grandmother, Johnnie Bell, who was a true traveling woman. What I personally love most about the JBT is how spacious and functional it is. Whether you're heading out for a weekend getaway or catching a long-haul flight, the JBT bag is designed to deliver style, structure, and smart organization all in one. So let's talk features. On the outside, you'll find an optional quilted front and side slip pockets for extra style and storage. There are two vertical zippered front pockets for easy access items. Turn it over on the back. You have a trolley sleeve with a zipper compartment, perfect for sliding over your luggage and keeping travel documents or essentials close at hand. Then you have the U-shaped top closure, which gives you a wide opening so you can see and access everything with ease, and unique top handles that are comfortable as they are eye-catching. Inside, the JBT keeps everything in order with two mesh pockets, a secured zipper pocket, a slip pocket, and a divided pocket. Perfect for organizing all of your travel essentials. So now that we have gone over all of the specs, let's get straight into the tutorial. So let's get right into it and go over all of our exterior pieces. You will need your flap. It is not interfaced at all. Your front panel on the wrong side is interfaced with fusible fleece and Decoville heavy. However, if you wish to use foam, you can definitely replace that instead of using fleece. You should have your left and right wing. On the wrong side, both pieces are fused with fleece as well. Next are your two side panels. On the wrong side, fusible fleece and Decoville heavy. You should have your back panel. On the wrong side, once again, fusible fleece and Decoville heavy. Here's your base, and on the wrong side, it is fused with Decoville heavy. Your trolley sleeve with no interfacing. This is your front pocket. You can do whatever quilting option that you prefer. You can freestyle it or you can leave it blank. However, if you are going to quilt, ensure that the wrong side is fused with fusible fleece and not foam. The foam is too thick. The same information applies to your side pockets. Again, if you're going to quilt, make sure on the wrong side you fuse it with fusible fleece. These pieces here are your connectors. They vary in size. You should have your front panel, back panel, and your side panel connectors. And on the wrong side, along the top edge, each connector is fused with Decoville light and it is centered. To help you identify which pieces are what, you can label them as FP, BP, or SP. You should have one zipper overlay, two piping tape, and two foam welt cording pieces for the piping. Next are your two handle pieces. On the wrong side, both of the handles are fused with Decoville light along the top edge on each end, and they are centered. Let's go over the trim pieces. You will have two side pocket trims, one front pocket trim, your slip pocket trim, and your divider pocket trim. Let's go over our lining pieces. This is the front panel lining. It is quite large. However, I'm using waterproof canvas. On the wrong side, there is no interfacing necessary. You will need two of your side panel lining pieces, your back panel lining, your base, your trolley sleeve zip pocket, one front pocket and your two side pockets, your two front zip pockets for the front panel, your back panel zip pocket, your slip and divider pocket, and last but not least, your flap. Okay, let's wrap this up and go over the hardware. You will need four 1-inch rectangle rings. I'm actually using strap adjusters. I like the look of the connectors. It has a center bar here, so it separates the bottom connector from the top handle. If that's not your preference, then go with the standard rectangle ring. You will need four 1-inch strap ends. These are completely optional. You need two 1-inch D-rings, your bag logo, two 1.5-inch swivel hooks, 1.5-inch strap adjuster, 5 bag feet, 15 rivets, and your 1.5-inch webbing for your strap. I purchased mine from Amazon. However, you can get yours from your bag supply store. In this step, we're going to start working on the connectors and the handles. Right now, grab one of your connectors, it doesn't matter which one, and on the wrong side, you should have already drew your center line and your 1-inch horizontal line from the top edge of where the stabilizer is. Next, we are going to cut away a portion of the top edge of the connector. Now you can use a ruler, but all we're going to do is just cut from the side edge of the horizontal line here, and we're going to stop at the top edge of the stabilizer. And we're going to do the same to the other side, and it doesn't have to look pretty. The main goal is just to cut away a portion of the connector. Just like that. Now let's add the DST right along or right on that center line. Before we remove the paper backing from the DST, let's remember which connector this one is, because once we fold the raw edges in towards the center, we are not going to see that anymore, so we want to transfer that information to the right side of the fabric. So this one is my front panel connector. Let's remove that tape, and then we're going to fold the raw edge towards the center line, and we're going to start from the bottom edge because it's going to make it easier once we reach the top edge. So keep going or moving up towards the top. And once we reach the portion of the connector that is cut, we're going to take that edge and fold it in towards the center line. And you're going to get fabric that is a little bit pinched here, if you can see that, and that's perfectly fine. That's the way it's designed. We're going to rotate and do the same for the opposite side. Now, if you have a bad memory like I do, I'm going to go ahead and write which connector this is so I won't forget. So you can just write it wherever you want. That makes it easier for you to remember. And we're going to work our way up towards the top edge of this connector. And once again, once we get to the slanted part of the connector, we're going to fold that in towards the center line, and we're going to pinch that fabric so that it meets each other from one side to the other, and it should look something like this. And with our scissors, we are just going to cut those raised bits or piece of fabric away. Now, when we cut across the raised center, be sure not to cut too close to the side edge of the connector. That way we don't see that cut mark when we add the connector to the bag. And now the connector is flat at the top edge. Now, once you have finished with this connector here, you're going to repeat the same steps for the remaining 5 connectors. And once you're done, all of your connectors should look similar to what you see here. And once again, they are labeled based off of which connector is what. And if you want to keep its shape or integrity, just put these under a flat book to apply pressure until we get to the point where we need to use them. Okay, all right, let's move on to the handles. We're going to work on our handles now, so let's just grab one. And on the wrong side, you should have already drew your center line as well as your 3-inch horizontal line. We're going to take our ruler and we're going to measure 1 inch away from the side edge of the handle, and we're going to draw a line from the top edge all the way down to the 3-inch line. Then we're going to repeat that same step on the opposite side of the handle, like so. And we are going to do the same for the opposite end. Now that our lines have been drawn, we're going to make a few cuts. We're going to cut on that 1-inch line that we just drew, and then we're going to cut towards the outside edge of the handle. We're not going to go past that 3-inch line, so we're going to cut right on it. And we will have something that looks like this. Now we're going to do the same on the opposite side. Now let's repeat this step for the opposite end of the handle. When you're done, both of the ends of the handles will look like this. Next, we need to apply a strip of DST in between the 3-inch line. So we're not going to apply DST to the ends as of right now. We will do that in the next step. All I want you to do is just put the DST below the 3-inch line, and it's going to stop on the opposite side at that 3-inch line as well. Okay, now let's remove the paper backing. We're going to fold the center of the handle in towards the center line. And we're going to work our way down to the opposite end. And if you want to know a fun fact, I made these handles by mistake. And sometimes I guess mistakes are good, because I fell in love with them after I saw what magic I had created. All right, so we made it towards the end on that side. Let's flip it over, and we're going to do the same on the opposite. All right, give that a good press. And we're going to flip the handle over to the wrong side. And with your ruler and your leather marking pen, we're going to draw a line that is 3 inches away from the bottom edge of the handle. This is going to be a guide for us when we get to the stitching portion of the instructions. Okay. So as of right now, you should have a 3-inch line on both ends of the handle. Now we're going to fold the handle in once more so that the folded edges are touching. So we're going to fold it lengthwise, and we're going to clip that into place. And we're going to work our way down towards the opposite end and clipping along the way. Now that we have folded the handle lengthwise and we clipped it into place, we're going to top stitch along the edge that is not open. So the closed folded edge is where we will top stitch, and we're going to start at the mark that we made here, which is the 3-inch line, and we're going to place our needle down at that line, and we're going to sew all the way down towards the opposite end of the handle, making sure that our needle stops at the opposite end where the 3-inch line is. Let's do that now. Now that one side of our handle is top stitched, we are going to remove the clips and we're going to fish for the long thread tails. So let's find those, and we're going to pull them towards the inside of the handle and do that for the opposite end. And then we're going to tie those threads and seal them with glue, and then trim the ends. And then we're going to do the same for the opposite end. So now that our threads are tied and secured, we're going to separate this seam just a little bit. We're going to try to manipulate it, make it a little bit more pliable. So let's just spread that out a bit, just give it a good massage, if you will. And in this next step, we're going to fold the folded edge of the handle towards the center seam of the handle. Now we can do this one or two ways. What I'm going to do is apply a strip of DST right alongside the center seam. If that is too difficult for you to manage, you can also just apply the DST towards the center of one side of each side edge of the handle. So you'll apply a DST on this side, and then you'll apply a DST on that side. However, I'm just going to center it down the center of that seam, and then I will show you what we're going to do next. Let's apply the DST towards the top edge of the handle, and make sure we're pressing down firmly because we want the DST to stick. So I'm going to do my best by trying to keep this centered, and then I'm going to work my way down towards the opposite end. Hopefully that was not too difficult. Let's once again press that DST into place. Now let's remove the paper backing from the DST. And mine's separated, and actually I'm going to stop here because we're going to be doing some work in this step. So let's start from the top edge of the handle. We're going to fold the raw edge in towards the center line. Okay. And if it helps, let's just clip this along the way. Actually, I'm going to recommend that you clip it into place as we work along because we want to keep everything in place. Now, once we reach the center of the handle, all we're going to do is take the folded edge of one side of the handle and we're going to fold it towards the center seam. That is all we're going to do. We don't need to go over it. We just need to go towards it. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to clip along the way so my work does not become undone. Okay. So continue doing this step until you reach the opposite end. All right, now we have folded one side. How was that? Not too bad? Okay, good, because we're going to move on and do the opposite side. So let's do that now. Your handle should look something like this. I'm going to turn this over to the wrong side, and I want to double check my work, and I want to make sure that I do not see the seam peeping through. Your folded edges should be touching each other. And so if they are, then we're going to proceed and we're going to do more top stitching. We're going to start at one top edge of the handle and we're going to top stitch along that side until we reach the opposite end of the handle. Then we're going to rotate and repeat the same step for the opposite side of the handle. So let's do that now. So at this point, each side edge should be top stitched. We're going to do one more round of top stitching. Essentially what we want to do is tack down the seams on the wrong side of the handle. We don't want them to separate when in use, and plus it looks very unflattering. So we're going to use a zipper foot in this step. If you have something similar, great. But what we're going to do is start with long thread tails, and we're going to start or position our needle at the 3-inch line, and we're going to hug as close as we can to the raised center, and then continue along lengthwise to the opposite end of the handle, making sure that we end with long thread tails and our needle stops at the 3-inch line on that end. We want to make sure that we catch the seam underneath, so just make sure you're double checking your work and that your stitching is not in the center, but only on the portion of the folded edge of that side. And then we're going to repeat the same step for the opposite side of the handle. And when you're done, your handle should look similar to mine. And on the wrong side, you will see that your stitching should have been caught with the seam that you were working on. And the same is true for the opposite side. Now what we're going to do is pull the thread tails to the wrong side. We're going to do that on each end. And let's pull back the seam so that we can pull the other thread through, and all 4 of your threads should now be on the inside of the seam and not outside. So it should be inside the seam like that. And then let's do the same for the opposite side. Pull back that seam and grab those thread tails so we can pull them towards the inside of the handle. Now let's tie a few knots. Pull them tightly, and then we're going to seal them with glue and trim the excess thread away. And then repeat on the opposite side. Now that our handles are complete, before we move on to the next step, if you're not using strap ends and you want a polished look, you can edge coat the raw ends of your handle. So this will be important for you to do it now so that it'll be dry by the time we get to the installation step. We're moving right along and we're getting ready to work on the front and side pockets. So at this time, retrieve your front pocket trim, and on the wrong side, add a few strips of DST above and below that center line, and you can add an additional strip at the lower edge. And at this point, find your center on your trim so that we can place the pocket down evenly onto it. So I just made a few lines there. And then we are going to remove the paper backing below the center line. And then we need to retrieve our front pocket, and then we're going to flip that over so that the right side is facing down. And we're going to line up the top edge of the pocket just below the center line, and we're going to leave about 1/8 inch of a gap, and I'm going to center my pocket right at that mark that I've made, which is my center. And then we're going to give that a good press. Okay. And then on the opposite side, we are going to remove the paper and place our pocket lining for the front pocket right side facing down as well. And we're going to center that on our center line. And again, leaving about 1/8 inch of a gap just below that line. Then we're going to go to our sewing machine and we're going to top stitch alongside the bottom edge where the lining is, and then we're going to top stitch following the curves on the exterior side edge of the front pocket. After we're done top stitching, we're going to fold the 2 pieces in half along the top edge of the trim, and we're going to match the corner edges together as well on the other side. And then we're going to go back to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along the top edge of the front pocket trim. After you are done top stitching the top edge of the front pocket trim, we're going to clean up any excess fabric that is sticking out beyond the exterior fabric as well as underneath. And then you are going to repeat the same step for both of your side pockets. And once you're done with both of your side and front pockets, they should look similar to mine. And we're going to put these aside because we're going to start working on the piping. You should have your piping tape and your welting cord. This step is pretty easy and straightforward. We're going to take the welting cord and we're going to center that cord onto the wrong side of the piping tape, and then we're going to fold the piping tape where the raw edges will meet, and then we're going to clip in place, and we're going to clip until we reach the opposite end of the piping tape. And you're going to do the same for the remaining piping tape and welting cord. Once you're done, your piping tape will look similar to mine. We're going to go to the sewing machine next, and we're going to stitch as close as we can to the welt cording. You can use either a zipper foot or a cording foot for this step. And we're going to start about 1.5 inches down from one end of the piping tape. And the reason that we are going to leave this open is so that when we get ready to install the piping onto the side panel, we're going to overlap that tape so it can have a continuous look. I would also highly recommend that you use thread that closely matches your fabric so it all can look seamless at the end. So let's go to the sewing machine and stitch both of our piping tapes. Now that we are done with our piping, they should look like this, and we're going to set them aside for now because we're getting ready to work on the side panels. We're working with the side panels now, so retrieve your 2 side panel connectors, and let's put one to the side for now. With your ruler, you're going to measure 1 inch down from the top tapered edge and draw a horizontal line going across. And repeat this step for the second connector. Now let's retrieve one of your side panels. With one of the side panels, we're going to measure and draw a line 3 inches away from the top edge of the side panel. And when we draw the line, we want to make sure it is centered on the side panel. Then I'm going to double check and make sure this line is straight and not slanted. So I'm going to use my ruler and place that ruler right at the 3 inch line and making sure it is even or parallel with the bottom edge of the side panel, and just redraw that line just to make sure it's nice and straight. Then we are going to draw the crosshair so that we can identify the center on this side panel, and we're just going to draw a line right in between the 3 inch line, and it should look something like that. Then we need to grab the side panel connector, and on the right side you can add a strip of DST towards the bottom edge of the connector, and we're going to remove that paper. And on the wrong side you should see your center line, and we're going to use that line so that we can center the connector onto the side panel. So we're going to place the bottom edge of the connector on above the 3-inch line. So we're not going to match up the 1-inch line with the line. If you do that, that's incorrect. We are lining the bottom edge of the connector right at the 3-inch line, making sure the center line is centered with the vertical line on the side panel. In the end, it should look something like this. So that vertical line is continued, it is centered, and the bottom edge of the connector is at the 3-inch line that we just made. Then we are going to clip that into place. And when we get to the sewing machine, we are going to stitch at the 1-inch line here. And then we're going to make a second row of stitching right below that line to make sure the connector is secured. So let's do that now. After the connector has been attached, this is how your stitching should look. Before we move on, if your DST is close to your stitch line, just cut some of that away, because when we get ready to install the D-ring, we don't want the D-ring to be immobile. We want it to move freely, and I know that the glue from this tape will prevent that from happening, so I'm just going to fold that back a little bit just to free up some of that clean space here. And next we need to grab one of our D-rings and slide the D-ring onto the connector, and then we're going to remove our paper backing from the DST. I'm going to grab my ruler, and this part is not in the instructions. I'm just going to make it a tad bit easier for you to lay the connector down centered on the side panel. And I'm just going to take that ruler and measure a 1/2 inch away from the center line that we marked on the side panel here. So I'm just going to lay that down, and perhaps I should use a different ruler. All right, so I'm going to measure a 1/2 inch away from that center line, and then I'm going to draw a few lines on the side of my ruler. Then I'm going to take that ruler and line it up against those markings I've just made and make sure that it is that it lines up with the edge of the side panel. Then I'm going to take the connector, and we're not going to pull down because we don't want this top edge to lift up. We want it to lay down naturally. And I'm going to pull up on the D-ring and position the connector right alongside that ruler so it is nicely centered. And if you're satisfied with that position, just double check the opposite side and make sure that the connector is centered. And if you're good, then we're going to move on. And then we're going to measure 10 inches away from the bottom edge of the side panel. And then we're going to draw a horizontal line going across the strap here. And this is going to be our guideline for our pivot point when we get ready to top stitch. So when we get to the sewing machine, we are going to top stitch along the side edge of the connector, pivoting at the line here and pivoting once more, going down the opposite end of the connector. And once we're done top stitching, we're going to clean some of the markings off of the side panel here. Now after you cleaned your side panel, we're going to add our rivet, and I'm just going to measure a 1/4 inch away from the top stitch line there, and then just add a vertical line halfway on the strap. And grab your 10 or 12 millimeter rivet, and we're going to install that through the connector, and then we're going to rivet that in place. And after you have repeated this step for the second panel, this is what it should look like. Okay, now we're going to move on and add the side pockets to the panels. Once again, let's put one away so we can just focus on one, because what we do to this one, we will definitely do to the other. So grab your side pocket, and we are going to lay the pocket right side up onto the right side of the side panel. And it might be helpful to identify your center on the pocket if you haven't done so already, because I'm just going to line the center of the front pocket to the center of the side panel here. And before we clip all 3 sides of the side pocket onto the panel, I'm just going to clip the bottom edge first. Then with my ruler, I am going to measure the distance between the pocket and the top edge to make sure that the straight edge is parallel to the surface, or the top edge there. And if you're happy with that placement, then go ahead and clip the remaining sides down to the side panel. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to base the side pocket onto the side panel. However, we're going to actually base the pocket on the wrong side of the panel so that we can follow the curves along the bottom edge. So let's do that now. And after we have basted the side pocket onto the side panel, I'm just going to turn it over to the wrong side and clip the fabric away from the curve so that we can reveal the curved edge. With the side panel facing up, we're going to grab the side panel lining and place them wrong sides together. Then we're going to clip around the perimeter of the side panel, and then we're going to go to the sewing machine and baste the lining onto the side panel. Well, let's put this away because we're getting ready to make the mesh pocket. In this step, we're getting ready to construct the mesh pocket. So you will need your mesh fabric, your 1/2 inch double fold bias tape, and your 1/4 inch elastic cord. And let's just set aside the fabric for now. And then you're going to add a strip of DST towards the bottom edge of the bias tape. I've used an 1/8 of an inch, I'm sorry. And we don't want to put the DST where the center fold is, because this is where the elastic tape or cording will be. And we don't want the cord to get caught with the stickiness from the tape here. So I'm just going to pull away the paper backing and grab my mesh pocket, and I'm going to take the top edge of the mesh fabric, and we're of course using the longer edge here that's 14 inches wide. And I'm going to place the top edge of my fabric right at the center fold of the bias tape. And try not to stretch the mesh fabric because we're going to cinch that anyway with the elastic cording. Before we move on, you will notice that we have some elastic that is sticking out. This is intentional, so do not cut this. We're going to use this in so that we can cinch the pocket. We're going to go to the sewing machine, and I would like for you to stitch a vertical line at the end. This is going to hold the elastic into place so that we can cinch the pocket. And then afterwards, we're going to top stitch along the bottom edge of the bias tape. Okay, your elastic should now be encased inside your bias tape. Now we need to retrieve the side panel once again and make sure you find your centers. We're going to turn it over to the wrong side, and we want to find the center of our mesh pocket. So I'm going to fold that in half and snip away a small bit of the mesh fabric here so that I can identify where my center is. Okay, and I know you couldn't see that, but we're gonna move along. But I'm going to center the mesh fabric along the bottom edge of the side panel. Then we're going to place a clip in the center, a clip on the left and right side, and then we're going to take the side edge of the pocket and line that up with the side edge of the panel. And one more here at the top where the bias tape is. And then we're going to do the same on the opposite side. And I'm not going to put a clip at the top edge of the bias on that side because we will be needing that to be free when we get to that step. So for right now, I'm going to remove the left and right side clips, and you will see that there's extra fabric here. So we're just going to pinch the fabric and fold that down towards the center and clip that into place. And then we're going to do the same on this side. Now, if you have a gap here, just reposition the pocket down slightly so that there isn't a gap. And once again, I'm going to gather the fabric and fold it down towards the center. Now that the mesh pocket is clipped to the side panel, we're getting ready to cinch the fabric in. So with the free end of the elastic, the easiest way to do this is to pinch the fabric on the opposite end and just pull. Just pull that down. And that way you can start getting the gathers at that end, as you can see here. So we're just going to work our way up by pinching that fabric and cinching that bias tape. You don't want to pull so tightly because we don't want the pocket to bend inwards. We want it to remain flat. So if you have too much of the gathering here, then release some of that tension so that the panel can lay flat. We don't want what I just demonstrated earlier. So I have a little bit of gathering here, and I'm just going to even this out. And while I'm at it, I'm just going to clip this into place temporarily so I can just work on moving the gathers to the opposite end. And once you're happy with the way it looks, then you can stop here, and then we're going to go to the sewing machine and base the mesh pocket onto the panel, just stitching around all three sides, and then we are going to cut away the excess elastic. Once the mesh pocket has been attached, we are going to trim away the mesh lining around the curves. Once you're done, your mesh pocket should be attached to both panels. We're going to move on to the next step where we start to add the piping. Let's grab our piping tape, and we are going to attach the piping with the raw edge towards the raw edge of the side panel. And we're going to start with the end that is open. We're going to position the edge right up against the center of the panel and clip that into place. And as we go around the curves, we want to make small or short 1/8" cuts around the piping that will fit along the curve so that it will lay nicely onto the panel. And then we're going to continue clipping until we reach the opposite side. Now that we are at the tail end of the piping, I am going to remove say about 1/2 inch of the piping tape away. Then I'm going to expose the head of the piping tape so that I can cut away the welting cord. And I'm just going to match the end of the tail to the welting cord, and I'm just going to cut that away so that we don't have an overlap and it just sits nicely. So I just trimmed some of that welting cord away. Now I'm going to lay the tail of the piping tape on the inside of that opening, and I'm going to clip that into place. We're going to go to the sewing machine next, and we're going to base the piping onto the side panel. As a friendly reminder, please use thread that closely matches your fabric, and we're going to use a zipper or cording foot because we are going to base stitch close to the cording. We're not going to base along the outside edge, we're going to base close to the cording. And let's do that now. Now that your piping has been attached to the side panel, both side panels should look like this, and we're going to put them aside because we're getting ready to work on the front panel. We're now working on the front pocket, so at this time, retrieve your 2 5 3/4 inch zipper tape, and you're going to add DST to the top and bottom edge of the tape. And if you haven't done so already, install both of your zipper pulls. I'll put aside my zipper tape for now, so let's retrieve our front panel. And if you haven't done so already, install your logo, it's going to be placed 1.5 inches away from the top edge. On the wrong side, we are going to install or place our zipper tape onto the zipper window. However, a good tip for placing your zipper tape inside of a zipper box is if you measure 3/8 of an inch around the zipper window. This takes the guesswork out of it and you can just simply lay your zipper tape without issue. So let's grab one of our zipper tapes, and we want to make sure that the head or the zipper is facing upwards towards your left side. And we want the zipper to open from left to right. That is how we're going to place it inside of the zipper window. So let's remove the DST from the top and bottom edge. And once again, the zipper head is facing upwards, and we're going to place that down right inside of that 3/8 of an inch box that we just made. And you might have to lift up on the panel a bit so that you can make sure it's nice and flat. And let's do the same for the opposite side. And I'm just going to flip this around and make sure that the zipper tape is centered inside of the zipper window. And if you are satisfied with the way it looks, we're going to turn it back over to the wrong side, and we need to retrieve one of our zip pocket linings. And at the top and bottom edge of your front zip pocket lining, you're going to add a strip of DST. And for now, let's just remove one end, or the paper backing from one end. And then we're going to lay the bottom edge of the zip pocket lining right up against the corner edge of the zipper tape. And then the short edge here on the side, we're going to line that up with the edge of the zipper tape there. And then we're just going to press it down. Okay, so as you can see here, the bottom edge of the zip pocket is lined up with the corner edge of the zipper tape, and the side edge is lined up with the corner edge of the zipper tape there. And then we are going to do the same for the adjacent side. Once again, the bottom edge is lined up with the corner edge of the zipper tape, and the side edge is lined up with the corner edge of that end of the zipper tape. And give it a good press. Then we're going to turn this over to the right side, and as of now, this is how the front panel should look. So we are only going to stitch the bottom edge of our zipper window. And we're going to do the same on the opposite side. If you want to work with one side for now, that's perfectly fine. But if you're comfortable doing both sides, you may do that in this step, and that's okay. So once again, we're going to top stitch along the bottom edge of the zipper window here. The bottom edge of your zipper window should now be top stitched, but let's just focus on one side. We're going to turn the front panel over to the wrong side, and we're going to pull those long thread tails to the rear. And we are going to tie them off and seal them with glue and trim the excess thread. Do that for the top and the bottom. Next, let's peel back a portion of the zip pocket here along the bottom edge, and we're just going to expose it so that we can see where the zipper tape is. And we're just going to make a cut right along where next to the zipper tape. So don't cut your zipper tape, just cut alongside it. And you should have something that looks like this. Then we're going to add a strip of DST from one end to the opposite side, just below that stitch line. And remove the paper backing from that tape. And we're going to fold the zip pocket wrong sides together, and we're just going to press along that seam so we can have a nice clean edge. Then we're going to remove the paper from the remaining end of the zip pocket, and we're just going to line the short edge alongside the corner edge of the zipper tape. So we're just going to line that up there and make sure that the sides are even with one another here. And then we're just going to give that a good press. Then we're going to go back to the sewing machine and finish our top stitching around all 3 sides of the zipper window. And once you're done here, you can repeat the same step for the remaining zip pocket. On both sides of the front zip pocket, it should be top stitched around all 4 sides of the zipper window, and your thread tails should have already been pulled back to the rear, tied and sealed with glue, and the threads trimmed down. Now we are going to remove the top corner edge here at the upper left corner, and once again we're just going to pull that fabric back so we can see the zipper tape so that we don't cut into the zipper tape. We're just going to cut alongside that, and then we're going to take that piece and throw it away, and then once again cut and remove the upper right corner of the zip pocket here. We're now going to close this pocket. So starting on one side, what you will do is pull back some of that fabric to expose the zipper tape, and we're going to stitch along the zipper tape here, and then we're going to go down lengthwise along the pocket. And then on the opposite side, once again we're going to pull back that fabric so we can expose the zipper tape, and we're going to stitch along the zipper tape and then alongside the zip pocket. Now you might have, this is probably going to be an inch distance, which is okay. We just want to make sure that we're stitching parallel to the lining side or edge here. So we're going to go to the sewing machine and do that for both pockets. Your pocket should now look similar to mine. We're going to trim away some of the fabric. So we can start with the wider edge here, and we're just going to leave about 1/8 of an inch of fabric remaining. And we can just cut right on up towards the top, and then here we're just going to cut alongside the angle. We're not going to cut into the zipper tape, we're just cutting away the lining fabric. And now your zip pockets are complete. This step is for those who are using cotton canvas and would like to know how to install the zip pocket lining for this particular piece of fabric. On the wrong side of your front panel, you're going to use pattern piece B and trace the zipper box window onto the wrong side of your fabric. Because I'm working with one side, I have already drew the cut lines for the zipper window, and you're just going to make a line down the center and draw 2 lines to make a V at the corners, top and bottom. Now we're going to flip the front panel over to the right side, and because we're working on one side, we need to grab the zip pocket lining. On the bottom end, apply a strip of DST to the bottom edge, and we're going to turn or flip the zip pocket lining right side facing down onto the right side of your front panel. And we're going to align the corner edge to the top corner edge of the front panel, and then we're going to clip that into place. And once the lining is clipped into place, we're going to turn it over to the wrong side once more, and then we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch around the perimeter of the zipper window. A tip that I would like to share with you: if you avoid stitching at the corners here, your fabric, once we pull it or turn it inside out to the wrong side, it will lay down flat nicely at the corners. It will prevent puckering. Once we have stitched the lining onto the front panel, we need to cut inside of the zipper window. So you can use an X-Acto knife or your scissors, and we're just going to cut inside, following the line that we drew before or earlier, and then we're going to connect that line at the corners here. Be sure not to cut into your stitching if you did stitch at the corners. And once you're done cutting into the zipper box, I like to add a few strips of DST about 1/2 inch away from the stitch line on the outer perimeter of the zipper box. This will help the fabric lay down nicely, especially if you're using waterproof canvas, because it is not a soft piece of fabric. Then we're going to take the lining and pull it through to the wrong side, making sure we get all of the lining over to the wrong side of the front panel. And once we do that, we're going to lay the fabric down. Then we want to make sure that we press down at the seams and fold the fabric back. And let that DST help you so that we can lay this down flat. And then work on our corners. All right, once that is done, if you want your zipper box opening more pronounced, you can take your iron and press around the seams on the front side of your canvas. If you're using waterproof canvas, you can also iron the back. Just make sure that your settings are on a low heat. But we're going to move on and install the zipper tape. I'm going to grab my ruler and I'm just going to measure a 1/2 inch away from the top edge of the zipper opening. And I'm using this as a guide so that I can make sure that my zipper tape is placed evenly and centered. Now let's grab our zipper tape and add DST to the top and bottom edge of the tape here and install the zipper pull. We want the zipper pull to face upwards towards the front of, or top edge, or the top of the front panel. And we're going to remove the paper away from the tape and place the zipper tape centered. And I'm going to use the edge of the tape and match that with the line that I just drew. And you're going to turn over your panel and I'm going to adjust the tape so that it is centered. And once you're happy with that placement, we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to start and end with long thread tails, but we're going to sew around all 4 sides of the zipper window here. Once you're done top stitching around the zipper window, let's turn the front panel over to the wrong side and we're going to pull the thread tails from underneath the zipper tape. That way when we tie the threads off, the threads won't show on the wrong side of the zipper tape. So let's tie them off, glue them, and trim down the threads. And whatever excess that you have, just tuck it underneath the zipper tape and then give that a good press. Then we're going to take the bottom edge of the zipper lining and remove the DST tape and align it with the top edge of the lining pocket and give that a good press. Then we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch alongside one side edge at an angle and back down the opposite side of the lining pocket. And once we are done sewing, we are going to trim away the excess fabric and be sure to not cut into the zipper tape, but we're going to leave about 1/8 to 1/4 inch of the seam allowance remaining, and this is perfectly fine. And once you're done, you should now have a complete zip pocket for the cotton canvas. We are going to turn the front panel over to the front or the right side, and we need to retrieve the front pocket. If you haven't done so already, make sure that you find your center on the pocket as well as your front panel. And we're going to place the front pocket centered onto the front panel, and we're going to clip the bottom edge into place. Now we're going to go back to the sewing machine and we're going to baste the front pocket onto the front panel, and we're going to baste alongside each side edge of the front pocket. Next, we need to add the front panel connectors. We're going to use the front pocket as a guide, and I'll explain that momentarily. However, if your zipper pull is in the up position, bring that down a bit because we need this space to work with. Grab your ruler and we're going to measure 6 inches in from one side edge of the front panel, and honestly you should be hitting the side edge of the front pocket here. we're going to draw a vertical line that is roughly between 1 to 2 inches away from the top edge of the front pocket. So I'm just going to draw a short line there. And then we're going to reposition the ruler and measure 2.5 inches away from the top edge here of the front panel. And once again, we're going to draw a line for the crosshair. And so you should have something that looks like that. And then we're going to repeat this step for the opposite side of our front panel here. And if your vertical line did not intersect, just draw the line down past the center line so that you can have a crosshair there. Now let's grab one of our front panel connectors, and we're going to treat this connector the same way as we did with the side panel connector. You should have already drew your 1-inch line that is away from the top tapered edge of the connector, and your DST, which is positioned roughly about 1 inch away from the 1-inch line that you drew, so that we don't have any stickiness in the center when we add the connector. And then on the wrong side, just add a small strip of DST, and we're going to pull that away, the paper that is, and we're going to once again use that center line on the connector and line that up right against the 2.5-inch line that we just made. And then we're going to clip that in place, but we're also going to make sure that the connector is centered with the vertical line. And if it isn't, then make your small adjustments here before we clip the connector to the panel. And once you're satisfied, we're going to clip the connector, into place. Once again, let's repeat that for the second connector, making sure that we line that vertical line right up against the 2.5-inch mark and clip it into place. Now we're going to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch across the 1-inch line on both connectors, and then we're going to make a second row of stitching just below the 1-inch line for both of the connectors here. And once your connectors have been stitched to the front panel, we're going to slide our rectangle ring onto the connector. And I'm going to use my ruler and measure 5.5 inches away from the side edge so that when I lay the connector down, it will be nice and straight. So once again, let's remove the DST paper. Then I'm going to carefully fold down the connector without pulling up on the rectangle ring. And I'm just going to position that right alongside my ruler here to make sure it is nice and straight. And I'm going to double check the top edge here and give that a good press. And let's do the same for the opposite side. And once you're satisfied with the look of the connectors, we're now going to top stitch around all 3 sides of the connector. So with your ruler, measure 9 inches away from the bottom edge of your front panel here. And this is going to be your pivot guide. So let's go to the sewing machine and top stitch along one side edge of the connector, pivoting at the mark that we just made and back down towards the bottom of the front panel. Our connectors are now stitched onto the front panel, and we need to install the rivets next. Now let's grab our left wing, and it's the wing that has the straight edge to the left side. And we're going to place this wing right side facing down onto the front panel, lining the corner edge of the wing to the corner edge of the front panel. And we're going to clip that into place. And we're going to grab the second wing and attach the wing the same way you did as the first one. Now let's go to the sewing machine, and we're going to stitch a 3/8 seam allowance along each side edge of the wing. With your wings attached, we're going to add a strip of DST to the front and back side of your seams. So let's do that now. Now let's remove the paper backing from one side of the wing, and we're just going to fold the wing wrong sides together along that seam. And then we're going to flip it over to the wrong side and remove the paper backing from that end. And then we're just going to spread that seam apart so that it can lay wrong sides together on the front panel. So this side is done, and we can do the other side. Your seam should look like this, and I'm going to turn the panel over to the right side. And with my ruler, I'm going to line the edge of my ruler to the edge of the wing and side panel, and just make sure that everything is nice and straight along this side. And if not, just clean up the side edge here. But we don't want to take away from the width of our bag, so just be mindful of that. We just want to clean up and make this edge nice and straight. And if you're satisfied with that, then we're going to move on to the next step. Now we're going to top stitch this section here. So we're going to go back to the sewing machine, and we're going to top stitch alongside the wing, and then we're going to turn that needle around and top stitch alongside the front panel. Then we're going to repeat the same step for the opposite side. I hope your panel is coming together nicely. We are going to now add the zipper tape along the curved edge of the front panel. So let's put this aside for just a second and grab your zipper tape for the opening of your bag. We're going to fold it in half so that we can find the center, and we're just going to make a small notch alongside on both ends of the zipper tape. Then I'm just going to use my lighter so it doesn't unravel. Okay, all right, our centers have now been identified. So let's separate our zipper teeth so that we are left with just one half. And we're going to grab our front panel once again, and we're going to take the zipper tape and line the raw edge of the tape against the raw edge of the curved opening here. And we're going to match the center with the center of our front panel and clip the tape along the curved edge here. And once we get around the curve, we need to make some small notches into the tape, only about 1/8 of an inch. We don't want to cut too deep into the tape. So let's make those cuts around this edge here. With our zipper tape temporarily clipped onto the front panel, we're going to go to the sewing machine, and we're going to baste the tape alongside the curve until we reach the opposite side. We will now identify this one piece here as the front panel. So your zipper tape should now be basted, and if you notice that there is a little bit of overhang, do not trim this away. We will need this in a later step. But for now, I want you to draw a line on your zipper tape where the center mark is. So I have a darker colored zipper tape. I'm going to use my chalk pen, but you can also use a fabric marker if that works for you. Just make sure that you test an area of your fabric so that when it's time to get rid of that mark, it doesn't leave a permanent stain there. So here is my mark. I'm going to leave this the way that it is, and we're going to move on to the base. I have already installed my bag feet onto my base. Remember, this step is completely optional. However, if you wish to add your bag feet now's the time to do it. I have reinforced my screws with super glue, and I've added duct tape on the screws to make sure that the metal does not rip through the material or the lining. So take the time to do that now if you want to add your bag feet. And what we're going to do is retrieve the front panel, And we are going to line the bottom edge of the front panel with the bottom edge of the base, right sides together. And we're going to make sure that we center the two pieces together. So I'm going to fold the front panel right side down so that the two pieces are right sides together. And I'm going to start my clips right in the center. So I'm going to match my centers right here. And we're just going to continue clipping alongside the bottom edge until we reach the opposite end of the front panel. So there we have it. Now let's go to the sewing machine and stitch a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance along one end to the opposite. The front panel and the base are now attached, and we're going to make a 3/8 of an inch snip along the side edge, and we're not going to cut through the stitching. We're just going to cut right up towards it. And then I'm going to do that on the other side. And the reason that we're doing this is to eliminate bulk when we get ready to put the side panels down. So let's grab our DST, and we're just going to add a strip of that towards the snipped side on the front and the back, and do that on each side. And then we're going to remove the paper away from the DST, and it might be best to separate the seams at this point and then remove it from the back side, and we're just going to press down on those seams so that we have the seams laying flat wrong sides together on the back side of the base and the back side of the front panel, and then do the same for the other side. All right, so now we're here. Let's turn this over with the right side facing up, and we're going to top stitch alongside the base, not on the front panel here. So make sure that your seam is facing towards the base, not facing upwards towards the front panel. So your seam should be lying flat this way, and we're going to fold the base down this way. And let's go to the sewing machine, and we're going to top stitch along the base from one end to the other. Hopefully you took your time with the stitching, because we really want that top stitching to shine through on our pieces here. So now we're going to move on to the back panel, and we're going to work on the trolley sleeve. Let's grab our trolley sleeve, and we are getting ready to draw the zipper box. On the wrong side, I have already done so. However, you're going to measure 7.5 inches down from one top edge, and it doesn't matter which side, as long as it is 7.5 inches. And we're going to measure down and draw the 6.5 by 1/2 inch zipper box. Once you have done that, we need to identify the top and bottom. So I'm just going to put a T here and a B for bottom. This is just so that we don't get confused during this step. And what we're going to do next is cut out the zipper box window and lay down the zipper tape onto that box. Then after you have made your zipper box window, I'm going to use my lighter and just singe the edge a bit so I can make this window look a lot cleaner. And just be careful during this step so you don't ruin your fabric. In the previous step, I made a 3/8 of an inch box around the zipper window so I can center my zipper tape onto the wrong side of my trolley sleeve. So let's grab that zipper tape, and we're going to add a strip of DST to the top and bottom edge of our tape. Now, the orientation of your tape is going to depend on you. So it depends on how you want your zipper to open. I like my zipper to open from left to right. So when I place the zipper onto my trolley sleeve, that is the direction that I want the head to point in. So my head is pointing towards the left so it can open to the right. Okay, so go with your preference. And what we're going to do is remove the tape from the top and bottom edge of the zipper. And I'm going to flip my zipper tape around to the opposite end so that when I turn it right side up, it'll be in the direction that I want it to be in. And I'm going to center my zipper tape onto my trolley sleeve. And I'm just going to pull that zipper out and out of the way so that now my zipper is opening in the direction that I want it to go in. To alleviate confusion, you can add the letters T and B at the top and bottom of your sleeve. However, we're going to turn this over to the wrong side and we need to grab the zip pocket for the trolley sleeve. We're going to remove the paper from one end of that sleeve, and with the top edge of the sleeve facing away from you, we're going to lay the zip pocket lining right side facing down onto the wrong side of the trolley sleeve, and we're going to line the bottom edge of the zip pocket to the bottom edge of the zipper tape, and then we're going to just press that down all the way across. Then let's flip this over to the right side, and we're going to go to the sewing machine, and we are only going to stitch the bottom edge of the zipper window. So the bottom edge of the zipper box window should now be top stitched. We're going to turn it over to the wrong side, and we're going to pull those long thread tails to the rear, and we're going to tie them, seal them, and trim the ends to make sure our stitching is secured. Next, we need to add a strip of DST right underneath the stitch line that we just made, and we're not going to go past that. We're just going to go in the center of it. Okay. And let's remove the paper backing from the DST, and we're going to fold down that zip pocket so that we can form a crease, and we're going to press down on that crease. Then we're going to remove the paper from the opposite end of the zip pocket, and we're going to lay the top edge to the top edge of the zipper tape here. And right now you should have something like this. So we're going to turn it over to the right side, and we're going to start with long thread tails this time. And we're going to finish top stitching around all three sides of the zipper box window. The top stitching around your zipper box window should now be complete. We're going to go to the sewing machine, and we're going to close the opening on the zip lining pocket. And I'm going to use my zipper foot and hug as close as I can to the fabric. And I'm going to use a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance to stitch down the zip pocket lining. And then we're going to do the same on the opposite side here. The zip lining should now be closed. I'm going to turn the sleeve over to the right side and peel back the bottom end of the sleeve so that I can expose the front side of the zip lining here. And I'm going to add a stream of glue. And the reason that I'm doing that is so that there aren't any air pockets. We want the two pieces to lay down flat and not poof up, and just makes the look seamless. So let's do that now and just add some glue. And I'm going to fold down that bottom end of the trolley sleeve and use my seam roller to make sure it's nice and flat and to remove any air pockets. Now turn over your sleeve to the wrong side and make sure that your zip pocket is lying down flat. And then we're going to take the top and bottom edge of the trolley sleeve and match the short ends together. Then we're going to clip that into place, starting from one end and stopping at the other. Then we're going to go to the sewing machine, and we're going to stitch these two pieces together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. The bottom edge of your trolley sleeve should now be stitched. I like to go the extra mile and add DST to each side of the seams, top and underneath. And I want things to work for me and not against me. So this is completely optional, but I'm just going to remove the paper backing from both sides of the seams. And then I'm just going to place that trolley sleeve down in this direction so that I can separate those seams. And it just makes it easier when we get ready to top stitch this in when we turn the trolley sleeve right side out. Okay. All right, so now that that is done, let's turn the sleeve right side out. All right, so give that a good press, and we're going to clip alongside that seam there so we can lay this flat. And then we're going to clip along the top edge. So just make sure you smooth that out so that the top would be even with the bottom. Now let's go back to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along all 4 sides of the trolley sleeve. Your trolley sleeve should now be top stitched along all 4 sides. And before we move on, we need to identify the center. So let's measure 4 3/8 of an inch from one side edge, and then we're going to make a mark at the top and bottom, or the bottom and the top of the sleeve. And then we're going to turn it over to the wrong side and add a strip of DST to each side edge of the trolley sleeve. Now let's grab our back panel, and I'm going to use my ruler so that I can make a mark for the center of this panel. And I'm going to use my chalk pen to do this. And I kind of just want to go halfway down. Actually, we're going to go all the way down from the top and bottom. And we'll clean this up before we move on. Then we need to take our ruler and measure 3 1/4 inches away from the top edge of the back panel. And once you have that ruler position, remove the paper backing from the wrong side of the trolley sleeve. And we're going to place the wrong side of the trolley sleeve centered onto the right side of the back panel, and we're going to use that ruler as a guide and line the trolley sleeve alongside the ruler and centered onto the back panel. So I'm going to use the center mark on my trolley sleeve and line that up with the center line on my back panel here. Okay, and then once everything is nice and even, or reposition if you need to, then give that a good press so that you can press that into place. Now we're going to add our connectors. We're going to use the same instructions for the front panel for the back panel. So we're going to measure 6 inches in from one side edge. And once again, we're going to use the top edge of the trolley sleeve as a guide. And I'm just going to make my vertical line here, and then move my ruler and place it 2 1/2 inches down from the top edge and make my crosshair. And if you need to extend that line, go ahead and do so. And then let's do that for the opposite side. Now let's grab our last 2 remaining connectors, and we're going to treat the connectors the same way as we've done with all of them. Let's make sure that we have our 1 inch line that is starting from the tapered edge of the connector with a DST that is situated a 1/2 inch down from that 1st inch line, and then just a small strip of DST on the right side of the connector. Okay, so let's remove the paper backing and position the connector, aligning that line, the vertical line, with the vertical line on the back panel here, and press that into place. And let's clip it as well to make sure that it does not go anywhere. And then once again, we are going to do the same on the opposite side. Now let's go back to our sewing machine, and we're going to stitch across that 1 inch line, and we're going to make a second row of stitching a 1/4 inch below the first line, and we're going to do the same on the opposite side for the connector. Hopefully you're feeling confident in your work because we are making good headway here. So let's remove our clips. And we need to grab 2 of the remaining rectangle rings. And we're going to slide those rectangle rings onto the connector. And once again, I'm going to place my ruler 5 1/2 inches away from one side edge so that when I lay the connector down, it will be straight and parallel to the side edge. So let's do that now and remove the paper backing. And without lifting up on the back panel, nicely place your connector alongside your ruler and make sure that it is situated nice and straight. And then let's do the same for the other side. And then with my ruler, I'm going to draw my horizontal line for my top stitching on my connector. And mine is roughly about 9.5 inches. Yours may vary, but just make sure that you're comfortable with the spacing between your connector and your stitch line when you get ready to go to the sewing machine. And as we did with the front panel, we're going to top stitch the connector. We're going to start on one side edge and pivoting across the horizontal line that we just drew, going back down the opposite end. Same thing for the remaining connector. Let's do that now. Our connectors are now attached to the back panel. So let's clean up any of our markings that are visible. And if you have any of your connectors sticking out from the bottom edge, give that a good trim across so we can make sure the bottom edge is nice and flush. And now it's time to attach the base to the back panel. So let's grab the base that is connected to the front panel, and we're going to take the back panel here and place the back panel right side facing down. And we're going to take the bottom edge of the back panel and attach it to the free edge of the base, and we're going to clip it from one end to the other, making sure that our centers are matched. Before we go to the sewing machine, I want to show you exactly how this piece looks before we stitch these two pieces together. So the base is in the center and the bottom edge is attached to the free edge of the base. I can't show everything on camera because this piece is quite large, but this is how the back panel should be attached to the base. Now let's go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch a 3/8 seam allowance along the edge of the base and the back panel. And now we're going to cut into the seam about 3/8 of an inch away from the side edge here. And remember, we're not going to cut into the seam. And we're going to do that on both sides and then add a strip of DST to the front and back side of those seams. Now let's peel the paper off of the DST on both the front and back side of the seams, and we're going to press that down so it looks like that, just like we did with the opposite side here next to the front panel. Now let's do our final row of top stitching. We're going to top stitch alongside the base here lengthwise, and remember the seam needs to be facing towards the base and not towards the back panel here, so it should be flat towards the base. Okay, we can put this aside for now and give our hands a break, all right? We're going to move on to the flap next. All right, let's grab our flap and the remaining half of our zipper tape. We are going to lay the zipper tape right side facing down, lining the center with the center of the flap here, and we're going to clip this in place going around both sides of the flap here. And as we go around the curves, make sure to snip into the zipper tape about 1/8 of an inch so that the tape can lay down smoothly. Let's go to the sewing machine and we're going to baste the zipper tape around the perimeter of the flap. The zipper tape is now basted onto the flap. We need to identify the center mark. So what we need to do, just like we did with the front panel, I'm using a chalk pen and I'm going to make a vertical line right where my center is. And I want that to be visible from the edge towards the top edge of the zipper teeth. Make sure that you're using a fabric marker or something that can be erased after we complete the bag. And I did not explain why we're doing this part here, but this will make it easier to attach the flap so that when we put the zippers onto the front panel and the flap, it's not misaligned. We want everything to be nice and straight when we get ready to add the flap to the bag. Now retrieve your flap lining. We're going to sandwich the zipper tape between the lining and the exterior piece. And let's flip the lining right side facing down. And we're going to line the centers and the top edge of the lining together, and we're going to clip around the side edge here. And when we are working around the curves, let's make sure that the zipper tape is laying flat. We do not want any rippling going on whatsoever on the corners here. With the lining clipped, we're going to use a zipper foot, and we're going to stitch a 3/8 seam allowance around all three sides of the flap. We're now going to make a few cuts into the curves here. We're going to make short or small notches so that the flap can lay flat when we turn it inside out. They only need to be about 1/8 of an inch, and be careful not to cut into the seams. So we don't need to make large notches, just small enough to make this piece work the way that it should. This next step is very important. We are going to singe the zipper tape so that it doesn't unravel. And with your lighter, get close as you can to in between those seams so we can seal the zipper tape. I know my flame is so high, my goodness. But this is the objective, so just make sure. Let me turn this down a bit before something catches on fire. But let's just make sure that we seal those splits where the zipper tape is. And once you're satisfied, let's turn the flap right side out. And then we're going to push the curves out on both sides so we can show that nice rounded edge. So work this out a bit, and then I'll meet you back here when it's time for us to top stitch around the top edge of the flap. Let's get ready to top stitch this flap. I am going to clip the top edge of the flap here, making sure that my center is centering, and add a few clips along the top edge of this flap. Before we top stitch, I want you to pay special attention to how the flap is operating right now. As you can see, the flap is going to do what the flap is going to do. So the zipper is being sucked into the flap. We want to make sure this is flat, and as we get ready to top stitch, I want you to pull on the zipper as we work our way around. So we're going to top stitch and pull the teeth as we work. So top stitch and pull, top stitch and pull, and we're going to keep doing that, especially around the curves, because we want those beautiful curves to shine through. And we're just going to do that as we make our way to the opposite side of the flap. This will prevent any rippling, and it will make sure the flap is flat as possible. All right, our flap is starting to look like a flap now. So as you can see, it makes a big difference when we are pulling the zipper teeth away from the fabric. It's seamless, it's perfect, and it's flat. That's the goal. And one thing I forgot to mention, top stitch along the top edge so we can close that opening. I'm going to turn it over to the back side so you can see how it looks as well. Perfect. So let's move on to the slip and divider pockets. This is the slip and divider pocket section, and right now you should have your divider pocket in front of you. If you haven't done so already, measure a 1/2 inch away from both sides of the divider pocket on the 9-inch side. Then we're going to add a strip of DST on the inside of that line that we just drew, so not on the outside, on the inside of the line, and apply DST to the opposite side of the pocket. Now let's remove the paper backing off of the DST from one side, and we're going to take this side edge and fold it to that line that we just drew, so it would only be folded at 1/4 inch. And let's repeat the same step for the opposite side. Now let's add a small strip of DST right at the top edge here, and we're going to take the bottom end of the divider pocket and fold it lengthwise. Now let's remove the paper backing from the DST, and we're going to take the bottom edge of the divider pocket and fold it upwards towards the top edge of the pocket. And then press that into place. And then fold the bottom edge down just a tad bit. Now retrieve your divided pocket trim, and on the wrong side you should already have a line that is centered and you have DST above and below that line. Let's remove the paper backing from the DST on one side of the trim, and we're going to take the top edge of the pocket here and place it about 1/8 inch below the center line. And let's press that into place. Then remove the paper backing above that center line. Then we're going to fold over the remaining half of that trim onto the divider pocket, making sure that the edges line up with one another. And we can clip that into place for right now and keep folding down the remaining free edge of that trim. Then we're going to clip the other side. Now let's go to the sewing machine, and we're going to top stitch along the bottom edge of the trim as well as the top edge of the trim. Once we're done top stitching the trim to the divider pocket, we're going to turn it over to the wrong side, and we're going to add a strip of DST along all 3 sides of the pocket. Let's put aside the divider pocket for right now and bring out your slip pocket. And on the wrong side, we're going to do just as we did with the divider pocket. However, this is a complete rectangle, so it doesn't matter which side you draw the line on, but pick a side and you're going to draw a 1/2 inch line on each side edge of the slip pocket, followed by a strip of DST on the inside of that line on both sides. So let's turn it over to the right side facing up, and I'm going to use my ruler so that I can draw a line down the center of my slip pocket here. And I'm just going to go about halfway in, just enough so that when I place my divider pocket, I know where my center line is. And then I'm going to find the center on the divider pocket as well, and that's going to be about 4 5/8 inch from one side edge. And I'm just going to add or draw a line at the top and bottom edge of the pocket. With the slip pocket in front of you, make sure that the slip pocket has the vertical line to the left and right side of you. Now that we have the center line identified, I'm going to use my ruler and measure 6.5 inches away from the bottom edge. And then I'm going to remove the paper backing from the wrong side of the divider pocket. And I'm going to carefully place my divider pocket centered right up against the line that we drew, making sure that it is nice and even all the way across. And as of now, this is how your pocket should look. Now we need to finish that center line, so grab your ruler and line the ruler up against the center line here and continue to draw that line onto your divider pocket, like so. Now let's go to the sewing machine, and we're going to top stitch around all 3 sides of the divider pocket here, and then we're going to stitch down the center of the line and stopping at the bottom edge of the divider pocket. Now that our divider pocket is attached to the slip pocket, we need to install the rivets, and we're going to put a rivet on each end of the divider trim as well as one in the center. With the rivets installed, we're going to turn the slip pocket over to the wrong side, and we're going to remove the DST from both sides of the slip pocket. Then we're going to take the side edge here and fold it to the 1/2 inch line, and do the same for the opposite side. After we have finished folding in the sides, I added a strip of DST along the top edge, and I'm going to remove the paper and fold the bottom half of the slip pocket towards the top half, and make sure that it is centered and aligned at the top. Give that a good press. Let's turn it over to the right side, and this is how the slip pocket should look for now. Now let's grab the slip pocket trim, and same thing as we've done with the divider pocket trim. Draw the center line and make sure that the DST is above and below that center line. And then we're going to remove the paper backing from one end of the trim and take the slip pocket, and I'm going to center that right underneath the center line, leaving about 1/8 inch of a gap there, and give it a good press. And let's remove the paper backing from the top half of the trim and fold down the remaining half over the front portion of the slip pocket, and make sure that we align the edges together so that everything is nice and even all the way through. At the sewing machine, we're going to top stitch along the bottom edge of the trim. And once again, this is completely optional, but if you wish to top stitch the top edge of the trim, you may do that as well. All right, so your divider and your slip pocket is now complete. Let's move on to the back panel. So grab your back panel lining and draw a center line with a chalk pen or a fabric marker. And with your ruler, you are going to measure 1 inch away from the bottom edge of the back panel. And if you haven't done so already, on the wrong side of your slip pocket, add a few strips of DST on all 3 sides. Let's remove the paper backing. And you are going to center the slip pocket right along the edge of the ruler, which is 1 inch away from the bottom. And you want to line the center line that you've made with the center line on the back panel. So press that into place, make sure it's even. Once you have the pocket situated, we're going to go to the sewing machine and top stitch along all 3 sides of the slip pocket here. Your slip pocket should now be attached to the back panel. We are now going to punch rivets on each side edge of the slip pocket trim here, and then we're going to move on so that we can add the zipper overlay. We're getting ready to install the zip pocket on the back panel. So for now, grab your zipper overlay, and we need to draw a center line on the right side. So measure 5 inches in from one side edge. Once that is done, turn it over to the wrong side and add a few strips of DST around the perimeter. And bring back your back panel here. And with your ruler, you're going to measure 1 1/4 inches away from the top edge of the back panel. Now grab your zipper overlay, and we're going to remove the paper backing from the top and bottom edge of the zipper overlay. And we're going to position that overlay right at the center and along the side edge of the ruler here, and make sure it's nice and straight. And when you're happy with that placement, let's remove the paper from the side edge here. Now we need to top stitch the zipper overlay to the back panel. So at the sewing machine, you're going to start and end with long thread tails, and you are going to top stitch around the outer perimeter of the zipper overlay. Now we need to remove the fabric inside of the window. So with your X-Acto knife or your scissors, gently cut inside the window here. Then I'm going to turn it over to the wrong side, and I'm going to carefully trim away the fabric without cutting into the zipper overlay. And be sure not to cut through your stitch line as well. After your fabric has been removed from the zipper window, we're going to set this aside for just a second. Now we need to grab the remaining zipper tape. Make sure that you install the zipper and you add DST to the top and bottom edge of the zipper. Now grab your back panel, and on the wrong side, we are going to center the zipper tape onto the panel here. And again, make sure that the orientation of your zipper is in the direction that you want it to be in. So I'm going to remove the paper backing from the DST. And then I'm going to center the tape onto the zipper window. Like so. Turn that around and pull the zipper pull through. And make sure everything is centered. After you have temporarily placed your zipper tape, let's put the back panel aside, and we need the zip pocket lining. Grab your back panel lining and add a few strips of DST to the short ends of the lining. Now place your back panel right side facing up, and we're going to remove the paper from one end of the lining here. We're going to place that in along the bottom edge of the zipper tape. Okay, all right, and press that into place. Now let's turn the back panel over to the right side. And then we're going to top stitch the bottom edge of the zipper window. Once again, pull the long thread tails to the rear and secure them. Now we need to add a strip of DST right at the start and end of our stitch line here. And remove that paper backing and fold down the lining. Then we're going to remove the paper backing from the bottom edge of the lining. And we're going to align the bottom edge of the lining to the top edge of the zipper tape here. And press that into place. Now let's go back to the sewing machine, and we're going to finish our top stitching around all three sides of the zipper window. Once again, secure your thread tails to the rear, and we are going to close the zip pocket here. So let's pull back a little bit of the back panel, and at the sewing machine we're going to stitch about a 3/8 of an inch down the side edge of the zip pocket, and then we're going to repeat the same on the opposite side. Retrieve your base, and we're going to attach the base right sides together with the back panel, and we're going to clip along the bottom edge here. And at your sewing machine, we're going to stitch a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance from one end to the other. The base is now attached, so let's go back to the sewing machine, and we're going to fold down the base so that it's right side up, and we're going to top stitch along the base here. So retrieve your front panel, and the right side should be facing down. We're going to align the bottom edge with the base and clip that into place. Then we're going to go to the sewing machine and stitch a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance from one end to the other. And then we're going to fold back that front panel lining, and we're going to top stitch the base just like we did in the previous step. So the lining construction is now complete. You should have your front panel attached to the base and your back panel attached to the base as well. In the next step, we are going to attach the lining to the exterior. So I'm going to roll the excess material up all the way towards the front panel so that we can eliminate some of this extra fabric. And then I'm going to clip it on the side. Then we're going to put this away temporarily and bring out the exterior body of the bag. And just like we did with the lining, I'm just going to fold the back panel up towards the front panel and clip that into place. And by doing so, this is going to help eliminate the extra fabric so it doesn't get in the way while we work. So what we're going to do next, we're going to flip the body of the bag over so that the front panel, wrong side, is facing up. Then we need to grab the lining, and we're going to place the front panel lining, wrong sides together, with the front panel exterior. And we're going to find our centers, and we're going to clip the edge of the front panel along the zipper edge of the exterior. The front panel lining is clipped to the exterior front panel, and I'm going to flip this over to the right side. Now, before we move on, I want to bring up a topic that a lot of my testers were asking me during the testing phase. Many of them are asking why I did not attach the lining to the right side of the exterior and then sew the lining alongside the zipper tape, and then afterwards flip the lining over to where it is wrong sides together with the exterior, the way you see it here. And the reason for that is it wasn't designed that way. But my testers did not have a problem with that method. So if you want to go that route, do it at your own leisure. However, I'm going to go with the way that the pattern is instructed. And once we are done stitching the lining to the exterior, we're going to add the bias tape around the zipper edge to hide that. So we're going to go to the sewing machine and use a zipper foot and stitch a 3/8 seam allowance around the perimeter of the zipper tape. And once we're done with that, we're going to come back here and then add the bias tape to the raw edges of the lining and the zipper tape. The lining is now attached to the exterior body of the bag, and we are going to grab the bias tape and we're going to attach the bias tape right at the top edge of the exterior. Now be mindful of your bias tape. We don't want to hug as close as we can with the teeth, because when we open and close the bag, we don't want the zipper pull to get caught in the bias tape. That wouldn't be fun. So we just want to place the bias right at the 3/8 stitch line that we just made. And for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm using a different color thread so that you can see it on the screen, but I would recommend that you use thread that closely resembles the color of your zipper teeth so it doesn't show through. All right, so let's start with adding the bias at the top edge of the exterior, right along that stitch line, and we're going to clip that into place, and we're going to make our way around the curve of the bag. Back to the sewing machine we go, and we're going to stitch a scant 3/8 of an inch seam allowance starting at the top edge of the bias tape, working our way around to the opposite side. Hopefully that wasn't too difficult. It looks really nice and polished. So what we're going to do next is cut away this excess fabric to include the zipper tape. We want everything to be flush with the exterior wing here. So let's do that. Now let's grab the flap, and we are going to match the center with the center on the front panel here. And all we're going to do is just align the zipper teeth together right at that center line. And then we're going to clip it in place. And we're only going to clip 1/2 of the flap and exterior. We don't need to do the same on the other side. So I'm just going to continue clipping until I reach the top edge of the wing here. One side should be clipped to the flap and the front panel exterior. And we need to grab one of our zipper pulls. The head of your pull should be facing downwards, and we're going to install the pull starting at the top edge here on the flap. And one side is going to have the zipper teeth feeding into it, and then we're going to line up the lower half, hopefully you can see that, line up the lower half of the zipper until it connects or starts to feed on the opposite side of the zipper pull. And if you struggle with this step, that is okay. Just take your time, and it should look something like this. So I have the pull installed, and I'm going to remove my clips. The objective for this step is to have the pull meet up right at the center. So your center line should be touching once you bring the pull down towards the center. And if you don't get it right the first time, that is okay. We can always readjust. So I'm going to turn it over, and voila, I have my centers. I'll bring it closer. I have my centers meeting right at the center with each other. Okay. And then once that is good to go, we're going to bring that pull all the way up, but we're not going to go past the lower end of the zipper tape. We want to keep that as close as we can. And then I'm going to take the remaining zipper pull and do the same thing that I did on the other side. And I'm going to bring that down, starting on the flap first, and then connect that pull where the lower end of the zipper tape is, so that these two zippers are now facing each other. Then I'm going to bring my pulls around to the other side, and now we have installed the flap. What we're going to do next is remove the overhang here. So grab your ruler and align the edge of the ruler to the edge of the wings here. And we're going to cut away the center portion of the flap so that this is flushed from one end to the other. The top edge of your front panel should now be flush from one end to the other. Then at the sewing machine, we are going to base the top edge of the front panel together so we can close the flap. And before we do that, the zipper tape here needs to be facing towards the center of the flap here. So not outwards like this, it needs to be flat towards the center of the flap. So I'm going to clip this into place along the top edge. Okay, let's go to the sewing machine. The top edge should now be basted. We're getting ready to attach the front panel to the back panel. So follow this step as closely as you can. I'm going to explain it as carefully as I can. But if you decided to attach the lining right sides together with the exterior, you're still going to do this step. So it's important that you do it the way that it's instructed so that you don't have any issues moving forward. Okay, so we're going to take the back panel exterior and place it right sides together at the top edge of the flap and the front panel. And we're going to clip along the top edge here. Just the exterior is attached right sides together, okay? Now we're going to turn it over so that we can see the lining. Then we're going to take the back panel lining and place it right sides together with the lining of the flap and the front panel. And then we're going to clip along that top edge here. Okay, so to get a better bird's eye view, these two pieces are not together. They are separate. The lining is right sides together with the lining, and the exterior is right sides together with the exterior. Okay, now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch all 4 layers together with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. The top edge is now stitched together. Now we need to turn the bag inside out, so I'm just going to take the lining and pull it through the bag so that it is wrong sides together. At this point, the bag is now wrong sides together with the exterior and the lining, and it should look that way all the way around. Okay, this next step is going to be a little tricky, but we need to top stitch the back panel on the exterior side. You're going to compress as much as you can, and you're going to top stitch along the edge or the side where the back panel is. We're not top stitching the front panel and the flap, just the back panel. So when you get to the sewing machine, you're going to have to pull back this fabric so that you can expose the back panel exterior, and we're going to start the top stitching from one end and finish on the opposite end. I know that last step was probably challenging, but hopefully you all were able to manage as best as you could. But I turned the bag right side out so that you can see how the top stitching looks along the top edge of the back panel here. I am now going to turn this bag inside out again, and this time we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to baste the lining and the exterior pieces together along both sides of the exterior or of the bag itself. Now that our lining and exterior are basted together around the outer perimeter of the bag, we now need to identify the center points. So what we're going to do is match the seams of the base. Hopefully you can see it. Okay, we're going to match these seams right at the base together, and I'm going to clip that into place for right now, and then I'm going to clip along the edge, just working my way up to the top so I can just make sure this is nice and straight before I clip into the fabric to identify my center points. Now once I have this side edge folded here, you should already have the center mark made at the base from clipping into that fabric earlier during the construction phase. But if you don't have that, go ahead and just clip into that corner there. And then at the top edge of the bag, I'm going to make a short snip into the fabric. So that way I know that this is my top and bottom center points for when we get ready to attach the side panel. And don't forget to repeat on the opposite side as well. We have now identified where the centers are for the bottom and top portion of the body of the bag. Let's grab the side panel, and once again, make sure that you know where the centers are for the top and bottom portion of the side panel. We are now going to attach the side panel to the body of the bag, right sides together. We're going to match the bottom center of the side panel with the center of the base. So let's clip that into place. And then we're going to match the top edge of the side panel with the center along the top edge of the body of the bag. And clip that into place. Next, you are going to continue clipping around the perimeter of the side panel. When you get to the corner edges here and possibly right here at the top curve, make sure that you cut short snips so that the material can lay flat nicely onto the side panel. Now that the side panel is clipped into place, we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to base the side panel onto the bag, making sure that we go around the entire perimeter of the side panel. And then once you have done this end, we're going to do the opposite end as well. The side panel is now basted onto the body of the bag. The reason that we did the basting first is so that the panel doesn't shift and it makes it easier to work with as we move along. We are now going to go back to the sewing machine and stitch a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance around the perimeter of the side panel, but this time we're going to stitch as close as we can to the piping. And the reason that we're doing that is so that when we turn the bag right side out, we do not see any of the basting stitches that we have made in the previous step. And then after that, we will add our bias tape. Our side panel is now attached using the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and now we're going to add our bias tape. For the sake of this video, I'm actually going to use my own bias tape that I've made using my waterproof canvas, and this is 1 inch wide. However, if you're using double fold bias tape, I am going to briefly explain how to install it on the side panel here, but I'm not going to actually sew it. So at any time, if this part is confusing or you're not understanding, please refer back to the instructions in the PDF to properly install the folded bias tape. So what we're going to do is open the pre-folded bias tape so that we can get rid of the folds, and we are going to take one end of the bias tape along the short edge and fold it down roughly about 1/2 inch. Then we're going to take that folded edge and line it up with the center of our side panel, and we're going to clip it into place. And as we clip the bias tape into place, we're going to continue doing that method around the entire perimeter of the side panel here. And once you reach the head of the bias tape, you're just going to overlap the tail end of the bias tape and overlap it, make sure it's on top. Then you're going to go to the sewing machine and you're going to place your needle right at the first fold line that you see that's closest to the edge, and you're going to stitch around the perimeter of the side panel. Once you are done stitching on the top side of the side panel, you're going to take the fold and allow it to fold naturally along the top edge, and then you're going to take the inside of the bias tape and ensure that you encase the raw edge of the side panel by overlapping or folding the bias tape onto the opposite side. Okay. And once you do that, you're going to go back to the sewing machine after all of your folded edges are on this side, and you're going to stitch along the bias tape, making sure that you catch the fabric underneath. So that's how you install the bias tape. So I do apologize that I'm not doing that in this tutorial, but I prefer to use waterproof canvas for my bias tape. However, since I'm using waterproof canvas for the bias tape and it does not have a natural fold, this fabric is not really that forgiving. So I'm going to work smarter and not harder and use my double-sided tape along the inside and the back side of the side panel, so that when I get ready to attach it to my bag, I do not have to worry about not catching the fabric. So it's really going to keep it in place. And if you want to use this method as well by using DST with your double fold bias tape, then by all means do so. I think it's a great way to not spend a lot of time doing something that we really don't enjoy doing, because I know I don't. But yeah, so I'm going to add this around the perimeter, and then I'm going to attach one side of my bias tape. So I'm just going to peel off the tape or the paper from the front side of the side panel here, and I'm going to align the edge of my waterproof canvas bias tape right where I can see the stitching, and just kind of go around, or I'm going to go around the perimeter of the side panel here by attaching my bias tape. And once I have the front side attached, I'm just going to remove the paper from the back side of the panel, and then fold the remaining half over that raw edge, and then clip it into place as I go along. After you have finished clipping the bias tape to your side panel, we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch the bias tape to our panel. And then I'll see you back here once you're done. The bias tape is now complete. I'm excited because we really get to see what our bag looks like. So let's turn it right side out. All right, that was a little difficult to turn. However, let's look over everything and make sure it looks good. And I think she does. If you want to call this a heave to, that's all right with me. So we are now going to install the handles for the bag, and then we're going to move on to the strap. And then we're going to wrap this up. Let's grab both of our handles, and with the wrong side facing up, on each end, we're going to measure 3 1/4 inches away from the bottom edge of the handle. And we're going to draw a line across, and we're going to do that for each end of our handles here. And once you're done, let's put aside one of our handles, and then we need to retrieve our bag once more. Now let's feed one end of our handle, wrong side facing up, through our rectangle ring, and then we're going to take the bottom edge and line that up with the line that we just made, and we're going to clip it into place. And let's take the opposite end of our handle and feed it through the rectangle ring, taking the raw edge and lining it up with the line that we just drew, and clip it into place. So now we need to find the center for our rivets, and I'm just going to place a dot about 1/2 inch away from the raised edge on my handle, and let's do the same for the opposite side. One quick note before we install the rivet: if you're going to use strap ends for your handle, make sure that there's enough clearance from the raw edge of your handle and where your rivet will be placed. So if it's not enough room, just bring your rivet slightly down so it doesn't interfere with your strap end. And once you're good with that placement, let's add our rivet. I've installed the rivets on both of my handles as well as the strap end here. You will notice that there's an opening, so use a little bit of super glue to close that opening. Just be sure not to add it to the strap end here. Just get it as close as you can so that we can close that off. And now we're going to work on the strap. Very quickly, I just want to go over a tip. When I'm looking for a strap for a particular bag and I can't find something that I like, I would normally go on Amazon and find a crossbody strap that is already pre-made, that has the hardware already attached to the strap, and then I would just remove that hardware and add my own. So that might be helpful to you, and it may not make sense to you if it's a little costly, but that's my preferred route. And so we're going to move on and unravel our webbing, and on the wrong side of our webbing, we are going to measure 2 inches away from one end of our strap, and we're going to draw a horizontal line here. And I'm using a fabric marker, that way I can remove this ink later on. Then I'm going to take my strap adjuster and feed one end of the strap through the adjuster and over the center bar, and slide the adjuster past the mark line that we just made. Then we're going to take the end of this strap and fold it up towards the 2-inch line that we just made, and bring your strap adjuster right where that line is, and then we're going to fold that fabric over once more, hiding that raw edge, and then we're going to clip it into place. We're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch a rectangular box along the folded edge here. But you will also notice that the strap adjuster is in the way, so it might be helpful to use an edge foot. However, if you don't have enough clearance to make that rectangular box, then just pull some of the fabric out so you can have the right amount of clearance to sew along all 4 sides of this end of the strap. Now that we're done with this end, we're going to continue working with the strap wrong side facing up, and on the opposite end we're going to grab one of our swivel hooks and feed that in through the slit here with the hook facing away from the fabric. And we're just going to feed that all the way through, and with that same end we're going to feed that in through the bottom of the strap adjuster, and we're going to fold that over the center bar here and out through the upper portion of the strap adjuster. Okay, so as of right now, this is how your strap should look. We should have the center bar and then one of our hooks on the opposite end, and we're going to continue with the opposite end of the strap. So I'm going to turn my strap wrong side facing up once more. Then I'm going to grab my last swivel hook and feed the raw end of that strap through the opening of the swivel hook, making sure that the hook is facing away from the strap here. And then I'm going to fold that end once, bring that swivel hook close to that folded edge, and fold it over once more so that we can close that raw edge, and then clip it into place. And just like we did with the strap adjuster, we're going to sew a rectangular box on this end, and then we're going to be done with our strap. And that's it. Your crossbody strap is done and ready to be attached to your Johnnie B Travel Bag, or JBT for short. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and that the final result met your expectations. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you found this helpful, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Goodbye for now.